My name is Clara Matheson, and I'm 38 years old now. The life I lead today, a life of quiet fulfillment, surrounded by a family I chose and a landscape that healed me, was born from an act of casual cruelty 16 years ago. It began on a sun-scorched highway in eastern Oregon, during what was supposed to be a family vacation. What my family called their greatest prank, their ultimate lesson in self-reliance, was abandoning me at a desolate rest stop. Let's see how resourceful she really is. I later learned they'd laughed as they pulled away. They assumed I'd come crawling back within a week. But I never did. When they finally found me, years later, I wasn't the girl they'd left behind. I was the woman she had been forced to become. To understand why they would do such a thing, you have to understand the climate of the Matheson household. Growing up in Minneapolis, in the shadow of my father's regional hardware empire, meant learning to treat emotional wounds as badges of honor. My parents, Robert and Helen, were firm believers in a philosophy of character building that often felt indistinguishable from cruelty. Laughter was the currency of our home, but it was almost always at someone's expense. My older brothers, Mark and David, were their father's sons, quick with a cutting remark and masters of the elaborate prank. The family photo albums are a testament to this, filled with smiling faces around a table where I, the perennial target, often fought back tears. There was my 16th birthday, when they gifted me a beat-up, non-functional car, laughing hysterically as I tried to process their joke. There was my high school graduation party, where they replaced the celebratory slideshow with a collection of my most awkward childhood photos, narrated by David with scathing commentary. Each time, the incident would end with the same familiar refrain, "Oh, Clara, don't be so sensitive. We're just toughening you up." My mother's methods were more insidious. Her critiques were wrapped in the guise of maternal concern. "That hairstyle is so artistic, dear, though it doesn't do much for your face shape," she'd say. Or, "You have such intelligent ideas. It's a shame you don't speak up with more confidence." My father, Robert, was a man of fewer words but more potent actions. He was the silent endorser, his booming laugh the final seal of approval on his son's taunts. Mark, the eldest, was already a vice president at Matheson's Hardware and Home, our family's company. David was in marketing, his clever cruel wit perfectly suited to crafting aggressive ad campaigns. I had just graduated from the University of Minnesota with a degree in graphic design, and the path laid out for me was clear. I would join the family business, designing weekly flyers and updating the company's dated website. My own dreams of working for a small, creative agency in a city like Portland or Seattle were dismissed as youthful fantasies. "You can do your little art projects for us," Dad had said, patting my hand at my graduation dinner. "It's a guaranteed paycheck. The real world isn't kind to artists, Clara." My financial dependence was a carefully maintained leash. They paid the rent on my small Minneapolis apartment, a fact they mentioned whenever I expressed a dissenting opinion. I worked part-time at a local bookstore, but my earnings barely covered my student loan payments and groceries. I was trapped, and they knew it. The trip to the Oregon coast was framed as a celebration of my graduation. As we loaded our luggage into the family's cavernous SUV, the usual volley of jokes began. "Did you remember to pack your common sense this time, Clara?" Mark quipped, referencing a time I'd gotten lost in a museum on a family trip when I was 12. "Or are we going to have to put a tracking collar on you?" The first day on the road was a marathon of microaggressions. David changing my music the moment I put it on, Dad criticizing my navigation despite using his own GPS, Mom making a comment about the unfortunate fast food options and how they would affect my figure. I spent most of the drive with my headphones on, staring out at the rolling plains of the Dakotas and Montana, telling myself, "Just 1 week. Then you can go home and figure out how to escape for good." I had no idea that escape would come sooner and more brutally than I could have ever imagined. The second day of the trip found us deep in the high desert of eastern Oregon. The landscape was starkly beautiful, a vast expanse of sagebrush and ochre-colored hills under an immense, pale blue sky. Looking back, The mood in the car that morning was unusually light. They were laughing with each other, not at me. It was the deceptive calm that always preceded a storm. "Need to stretch our legs," Dad announced, pulling off the highway into a rest stop. It wasn't much, a small brick building with restrooms, a few covered picnic tables, and a single vending machine, all surrounded by miles of empty terrain. The nearest town was a tiny dot on the map 30 miles away. "I'm going to walk a bit," I said, needing to escape the confines of the car. I grabbed my water bottle and my small purse. "Don't leave without me," I added, a phrase that had become a running joke in my family since they'd accidentally left me at a movie theater for an hour when I was 15. "Wouldn't dream of it," Mark said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. I walked to the edge of the rest area, breathing in the dry, clean air. The silence was profound, broken only by the whisper of the wind through the sage. I turned back toward the parking lot, expecting to see my family milling around the car. Instead, I saw the taillights of our SUV disappearing down the highway on-ramp. For a moment, my brain refused to process the image. I thought they were just moving the car to a shadier spot. I scanned the small lot. It was empty except for a lone semi-truck, its driver asleep in the cab. My heart began to thud against my ribs. A familiar, cold dread crept up my spine. They couldn't have. Not here. Not in the middle of nowhere. I pulled out my phone and called my father. Straight to voicemail. My mother. Voicemail. Mark. Voicemail. I tried David. He answered on the third ring, his voice slick with amusement. "Where are you?" I demanded, my voice trembling. I could hear Mark laughing in the background. "Oh, about 10 miles down the road," David said breezily. "Decided to give you a head start on that solo hike you're always talking about." "This isn't funny, David. Turn around and come back." Panic was clawing at my throat. "Relax. It's a life lesson," he said, parroting our father's favorite phrase. "Dad says to test those survival skills. See if you can find your way to the coast. It'll be a great story to tell." "David, please. Check your texts, sis," he said, and the line went dead. A message from Mark popped up on my screen. It was a selfie of the four of them in the car, grinning, with the caption, "See you in Seaside. If you make it." Face with tears of joy. I tried calling them all again, one by one. Each call went straight to voicemail. They had blocked me. I sank onto a concrete bench, the harsh midday sun beating down on me, and the full weight of my situation crashed in. They had done it. They had actually abandoned me, hundreds of miles from anywhere I knew, with nothing but the clothes I was wearing, a nearly empty water bottle, and a purse. I checked its contents. My wallet held $48, a debit card linked to an account with maybe $300 in it, and my driver's license. My phone's battery was at 22%. My suitcase, my laptop, everything I owned that mattered, was speeding away from me in the trunk of their car. I spent the next 2 hours cycling through disbelief, fury, and a bone-deep terror. I kept looking at the highway, expecting, praying to see our SUV reappear. It never did. Instead, a group text came through from my mother. It was a picture of their lunch at a diner in the next town. "The pie here is delicious. Hope you found something to eat." As the afternoon began to wane, the semi-truck driver woke up and prepared to leave. He was a burly man with a kind face who saw my distress. "You all right, miss?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. Through a fresh wave of tears, I choked out the story. He shook his head in disgust. "Some families," he muttered. "Look, I'm headed east, back the way you came. I can give you a ride to Havenwood. It's about 30 miles from here. It's not much, but there's a motel and a cafe." Hope, fragile and desperate, flickered within me. "Thank you," I whispered. As I climbed into the cab of his truck, the last of my phone's battery drained away. The screen went black, severing my last, toxic connection to the life I had known. As the small town of Havenwood came into view, nestled in a shallow valley, I realized I was facing a choice. I could spend what little money I had trying to get back to the people who saw me as disposable, or I could take this terrifying, unwanted freedom, and see where it led. Havenwood was a quiet town, with a main street lined by old brick buildings that housed a handful of businesses, a grocery store, a cafe, a hardware shop, and a small B&B called the Willow Creek Inn. The truck driver dropped me off in front of the cafe, wished me luck, and rumbled off down the highway, leaving me in the quiet evening air. My immediate needs were shelter and a way to contact the outside world. The Willow Creek Inn was a beautifully maintained Victorian house with a wide, welcoming porch. A woman with kind eyes and a cascade of silver hair pulled back in a loose bun answered the door. Her name was Evelyn. I need a room for the night, I said, my voice hoarse. And maybe the use of a phone charger? She must have seen the desperation in my face. Instead of just quoting me a rate, she ushered me inside into a warm, cozy parlor that smelled of lemon polish and old books. You look like you've had a long day, dear. Let's get you settled, and then we can talk. Over a cup of chamomile tea, the whole story spilled out of me. Evelyn listened with a quiet, compassionate focus, her expression shifting from disbelief to a gentle sort of anger on my behalf. What they did is unconscionable, she said when I finished, her voice firm. That's not a prank, Clara. That's abandonment. She let me use her landline to call my parents' house. I knew the number by heart. No answer. I called my father's cell. No answer. She lent me a charger, and when my phone finally came back to life, it was to a barrage of messages that crushed any lingering hope that this was a short-lived joke. My father had texted, "Called your landlord in Minneapolis. Let her know you won't be making rent this month. A little motivation for you to get resourceful." My mother had added, "This is what tough love looks like, honey. You need to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. You'll thank us for this one day." I stared at the screen, the words blurring through my tears. They hadn't just left me, they had systematically dismantled my life from 1,000 miles away. I had no home to return to, not enough money for a bus ticket, let alone a security deposit on a new apartment. I was well and truly alone. Evelyn found me on the porch swing, staring into the darkness. "Bad news, I take it," she said softly. "They cut me off completely," I said, my voice hollow. "I have nowhere to go." "Yes, you do," she said, sitting beside me. "You can stay here. My guest room upstairs is empty most of the time. I charge a modest rent, but we can work something out. I've been needing help with the inn, checking guests in, a bit of cleaning, updating my dreadful website. You can work to cover your board until you get on your feet." The offer was so kind, so unexpected, it brought on a fresh wave of tears, this time of gratitude. That night, lying in a comfortable bed in a stranger's house, I made a decision. I wasn't going to try to get back to Minneapolis. I wasn't going to beg for forgiveness from a family that had demonstrated such profound cruelty. The life I'd known was over. A new one, terrifying and uncertain, was beginning here, in Havenwood. The first month was a blur of survival. I took a morning shift waitressing at the Daily Grind, the town's only cafe, earning cash for food and essentials. In the afternoons and evenings, I helped Evelyn at the inn. My first project was redesigning her brochures and creating a simple, elegant website. For the first time, I was using my degree for something that mattered, something that was appreciated. The act of creating something beautiful out of the chaos of my life was deeply therapeutic. The people of Havenwood were reserved, but kind. They were used to seeing travelers pass through, but as the weeks turned into a month, they began to recognize me. Nods turned into greetings. "Morning, Clara," became a familiar sound as I walked to work. My coworker at the cafe, a young single mother named Maya, became my first real friend. She'd grown up in Havenwood and understood the quiet rhythms of small-town life. "Sounds to me like they did you a favor," she said one day after I told her a heavily edited version of my story. "Sometimes you have to be thrown out of the nest to realize you can fly." Her words stuck with me. Maybe she was right. One afternoon, a man came into the inn to book a room for a visiting colleague. He saw me working on Evelyn's website on her old desktop computer. He was handsome in a quiet, unassuming way, with thoughtful eyes and a calm demeanor. His name was Liam. "That's a nice layout," he commented, pointing to the screen. "Clean and user-friendly." "Thank you," I said, surprised. "I'm a graphic designer." "I'm a software developer," he said with a small smile. "I work remotely. Moved here from Seattle for the peace and quiet. There's not much call for web design in Havenwood, but some of my clients are always looking for good freelance designers. If you're interested, I could pass your name along." It was the first real glimmer of a future, a path that was entirely my own. That night, I created a new email address, one my family didn't know. I built a simple online portfolio of my college work. And for the first time since that day at the rest stop, I felt a spark of excitement, not just for survival, but for what I might build. As my first month in Havenwood ended, I received one last text from my mother, which had somehow gotten through before my block was complete. "Your silence is very childish, Clara. Call us when you've decided to grow up." I looked at the message, then at the portfolio I had just finished building. I thought of Evelyn's kindness, Maya's friendship, and Liam's encouraging offer. I deleted the message, confirmed the block on all their numbers, and turned my face toward the future. They wanted me to grow up. I decided I would do it without them. The next 5 years in Havenwood were a quiet revolution. My life took on a rhythm dictated not by my family's expectations, but by my own efforts and the changing seasons of Eastern Oregon. I moved out of Evelyn's Inn and into a small apartment above the old movie theater, a space with high ceilings and a view of the rolling hills. The rent was modest, and paying for it with money I had earned myself was a feeling of profound satisfaction. I bought a second-hand desk and a new laptop, and Clearwater Creatives was born. Liam became my collaborator and my staunchest advocate. He'd bring me in on his projects, introducing me to clients as his design partner. My work spoke for itself. One small project led to another. The logo for a boutique winery in the next valley. The branding for an organic farm. The website for a fishing guide on the Deschutes River. My reputation grew through word of mouth, a quiet network of small business owners who appreciated my clean aesthetic and my dedication. I kept my job at the cafe for the first 2 years, enjoying the human connection and the steady income while I built my freelance business. It grounded me in the community. I learned the names of everyone's kids, their weekend plans, their minor triumphs and troubles. These were the simple, authentic connections I had craved my entire life. I was no longer Clara Matheson, the sensitive daughter. I was Clara, the designer, the waitress, the friend. My relationship with Liam deepened slowly, naturally. We'd hike on weekends, exploring the canyons and forests that surrounded our town. We'd cook dinner together, sharing stories of our pasts. He knew the truth about my family, and he never treated me like I was broken. He saw my resilience, not my fragility. About 4 years after I arrived in Havenwood, my past tried to find me. An email slipped through my spam filter. It was from my brother Mark. "We're worried about you," it read. "It's been years. Dad's not doing well. Please come home." The manipulation was so familiar it was almost comforting. I debated for a week before responding. "I am safe and I am happy," I wrote back. "I have built a life for myself. My absence is a direct result of your actions. Do not contact me again." I set up a more robust filter and didn't hear from them again for a long time. My business continued to grow. I hired my first employee, a young designer fresh out of college from Portland who was eager to escape the city. We moved Clearwater Creatives from my apartment to a small, rented office space on Main Street. I was a business owner, a mentor, a respected member of the community. The day of my 5-year anniversary in Havenwood, I drove out to the rest stop where my family had left me. I stood on the same patch of asphalt, but the view was different. I didn't see desolation. I saw the vast, open space that had given me room to become myself. The air was still dry and clean, the silence still profound. But it was no longer the silence of abandonment. It was the silence of peace. I wasn't the scared girl they had left there. I was a 30-year-old woman with a home, a thriving business, and a loving partner. That evening, Liam took me to dinner at a new restaurant that had opened up in the next town over. To new beginnings, he said, raising his glass. And to finding home in the most unexpected of places, I replied, my heart full. The memory of my family was like a faint scar, a reminder of a wound that had long since healed. I believed the door to that part of my life was closed for good. But the past has a way of showing up uninvited. A year later, on a business trip to Portland for a creative conference, my carefully constructed world collided with the one I'd left behind. I was in the hotel lobby, reviewing my presentation notes, when a voice I hadn't heard in 6 years cut through the low murmur of conversation. Clara? My God, is that really you? I looked up into the shocked face of my brother, Mark. He was wearing an expensive suit, a lanyard with a conference badge around his neck. He looked older, more tired, but his expression of stunned disbelief was the same. Hello, Mark, I said, my voice calmer than I felt. My heart was hammering, a frantic bird against my ribs. I can't believe it! He sat in the armchair across from me without asking. We've been looking for you. We hired a private investigator. I wasn't lost, I said, closing my laptop. I was creating a life. He took me in, my professional clothes, the confident way I held myself. You look good, successful. There was an edge of surprise in his voice, as if he couldn't reconcile this version of me with the one he remembered. I am, I said simply. What do you want, Mark? I want you to come home. This has gone on long enough. Mom is a wreck. Dad's health really isn't good this time. The old, familiar levers of guilt and obligation. My home is in Havenwood, I said, my voice firm. And my life is there. He scoffed. Havenwood? That one-horse town in the middle of nowhere? What could you possibly be doing there? The condescension, so effortless and familiar, ignited a cold fire in my chest. I own a business there. Clearwater Creatives. We have clients all over the Pacific Northwest. I have a partner. I have friends. I have a life that doesn't involve being the punchline to your jokes. His face hardened. It was a prank, Clara. A stupid prank that got out of hand. We never meant for you to disappear. You left me on the side of a highway with $48 and a dying phone, I said, my voice low and intense. You cut off my apartment. You laughed about it in text messages. That's not a prank, Mark. That's a calculated act of cruelty. Did you ever, for 1 second, think about what could have happened to me? He had the grace to look away. We thought you'd call from a bus station in a day or two, asking for money, admitting you couldn't handle it. You wanted me to fail, I said, the realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. You didn't do it to make me stronger. You did it to prove I was weak. That's not true, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? I stood up, gathering my things. I have a presentation to give. It was illuminating to see you, Mark. Goodbye. He stood up, grabbing my arm. You can't just walk away again. The family deserves to know you're okay. I pulled my arm from his grasp, my newfound strength surging through me. You gave up the right to deserve anything from me 6 years ago. Don't come looking for me again. I walked away without looking back, my legs shaking but my spine straight. The encounter was painful, a violent tearing at an old scar. But it was also clarifying. I wasn't a frightened girl anymore. I was a woman who knew her own worth, a worth that had been forged in the fires of their rejection. I returned to Havenwood not weakened, but strengthened, my resolve to protect the life I had built more solid than ever. I had faced the ghost of my past and discovered it had no power over me. The future was mine, and it belonged in the quiet hills of Oregon, a world away from the people who had tried to break me. 16 years. It's a lifetime. Long enough for a scared young woman to become a confident business owner, a wife, a mother. Long enough for wounds to fade into pale, silvery scars. At 38, My life was rooted deeply in the soil of Havenwood. Clearwater Creatives had grown beyond my wildest dreams, with a team of 6 designers and a beautiful office in a renovated downtown building. Liam and I were married, with a 9-year-old son, Owen, a bright, compassionate boy who knew more about the local flora and fauna than I ever would. We lived in a house we'd designed ourselves, a modern structure of wood and glass that overlooked the winding creek from which my company took its name. My chosen family, Evelyn, Maya, and a dozen other friends, was the bedrock of my existence. The past was a distant country, a place I rarely visited. Then, one crisp autumn afternoon, a certified letter arrived. The return address was a law firm in Minneapolis. My hands trembled as I opened it. The letter was formal, concise. It informed me of the recent sale of Matheson's hardware and home. My father, his health in decline, had finally retired. The proceeds of the sale, a substantial 7-figure sum, were to be divided equally among his 3 children, Mark, David, and me. I sank into a kitchen chair, the letter shaking in my hand. Enclosed was a smaller envelope, with my name handwritten in my mother's familiar, elegant script. For a long time, I just stared at it. After the encounter with Mark in Portland 10 years prior, I had made it clear any further contact would be considered harassment. They had, to my surprise, respected my wishes. Now this. Liam came in from his home office and saw my face. "What is it?" I handed him the lawyer's letter. He read it, his eyebrows shooting up. "Wow, I guess they're really trying to make amends." "Maybe," I said, picking up my mother's letter. "The real test is in here." With Liam sitting beside me, I opened it. "My dearest Clara," it began. "I hope this letter finds you well. I imagine the news from the lawyers was a surprise. It was your father's decision, entirely. He said it was the only way he knew how to say he was sorry. Things are different here, Clara. Time has humbled us. Your brothers have children of their own, and the reality of being a parent has given them a perspective they sorely lacked. We are not the same people who drove away from you that day. We are hosting one last gathering at the house before we sell it and move to a smaller place. A farewell of sorts. It would mean the world to us if you would come. No pressure, no demands. Just a chance for us to see you, to meet your family if you'd allow it, before this chapter of our lives closes for good. Whatever you decide, please know that not a day goes by that I don't regret what we did and what we lost. With love, Mom." For weeks, the letter sat on my desk. The invitation was a quiet, unassuming thing, yet it held the weight of 16 years of silence and pain. "Are you going to go?" Liam asked one evening as we watched Owen chasing fireflies in the backyard. What would I even be looking for? I wondered aloud. An apology? Forgiveness? I've already built a life without any of that. "Maybe you're not looking for something," he suggested gently. "Maybe you're just showing them who you've become." His words resonated. I had spent so long defining myself in opposition to them. Perhaps the final step in my journey was to face them not as their victim, but simply as myself. I decided to go. Alone. I booked a flight to Minneapolis and a room at a downtown hotel. I would attend the gathering and fly home the next day. This was for me a closing of a circle. The family home looked smaller than I remembered. My mother answered the door, her eyes filling with tears when she saw me. "Clara, you came." Her hug was tentative, fragile. The afternoon was a surreal tapestry of past and present. I met my nieces and nephews, children who looked at me with open curiosity, with no knowledge of the family's fractured history. Mark and David were subdued, their old arrogance replaced by a weary, paternal gentleness. We spoke of neutral topics, my business, their children's schools, the changing seasons. The monstrous act that had separated us was a ghost in the room, acknowledged by all but named by none. After dinner, my father, now frail and leaning on a cane, asked me to walk with him in the garden. For a long time, we walked in silence. "I read an article about your company a few years ago," he said, his voice raspy. "The one in that business magazine. You built something impressive, Clara. All on your own. I had to, I said quietly. He stopped by a rosebush, his hand trembling as he touched a petal. What we did, it was a cruel thing. There's no excuse for it. My own father was a hard man. I thought I was making you strong. Instead, I just broke my own family. He finally looked at me, his eyes clouded with a deep, ancient sorrow. I am sorry, Clara, for that day and for all the days before it. In that moment, I saw him not as the tyrant of my childhood, but as a flawed, broken man who had passed down the cruelty that had been inflicted upon him. The anger I had carried for so long didn't vanish, but it softened, transformed into a kind of sad, quiet pity. I know, Dad, I said. And in those 3 words, there was a universe of meaning. It was not forgiveness, not yet. But it was an acknowledgement. It was closure. I flew back to Oregon the next morning, leaving the inheritance to be managed by lawyers and the fragile new peace to settle where it may. As the plane descended toward the green landscape of the Pacific Northwest, I felt a profound sense of lightness. The journey that had begun at a desolate rest stop was finally over. I had not found my way back to the family that had left me, but I had, in the end, found my way back to myself. When Liam and Owen met me at the airport, their faces alight with love, I knew I was home. My family was here, in the life I had built with my own 2 hands, in the community that had taken me in the love that was given freely, without condition or cruelty. Sometimes, the greatest act of love is to let go. And sometimes, the most terrifying journey leads you to the exact place you were always meant to be. I was left behind, but in doing so, I found everything that truly mattered.